Every day we wake up to news that reminds us of how fragile life truly is. Today, the world lost four remarkable American legends, people who inspired us, entertained us, and shaped our culture in ways we'll never forget. Their stories remind us that greatness isn't about how long we live. It's about the mark we leave behind. The world of jazz grew a little quieter this week. News came from New York that Jack DeJohnette, one of the greatest drummers in the history of modern jazz, has passed away on October 26, 2025, at the age of 83. For generations, his rhythm was more than sound. It was the heartbeat of innovation. Born in Chicago in 1942, Jack's journey began like many great stories, with a piano, a restless mind, and a deep love for melody. But it was the drums that became his true language. From the moment he sat behind a kit, he didn't just play, he spoke through rhythm. His beats were never just background. They told stories of soul, of movement, of freedom. In the late 1960s, Jack DeJohnette rose to fame alongside some of the biggest names in jazz. He played with Miles Davis during the groundbreaking Bitches Brew sessions, helping to shape the birth of jazz fusion. He later joined Keith Jarrett's Standards Trio, where their delicate balance of melody and silence became legendary. Audiences around the world knew, when Jack played, something spiritual happened. Those who worked with him often described him as quiet, humble, and deeply in tune with every note that surrounded him. His rhythm wasn't loud, it was alive. He once said in an interview, "Drums are about listening as much as they are about playing." That philosophy became the core of his life's work. Over the next 5 decades, Jack recorded dozens of albums under his own name and performed with legends like Herbie Hancock, Freddie Hubbard, and Chick Corea. His music crossed borders, blending jazz, rock, world rhythms, and even classical tones. No matter the style, there was always a warmth, a humanity in his sound. In concerts, fans often noticed the calm on his face as he played. It was as if he was channeling something greater, something beyond music. A friend once said, "Jack didn't just keep time, he kept soul." That quiet truth defined his art. Tributes began pouring in soon after news of his passing spread. Keith Jarrett's family released a short message. Jack was more than a collaborator. He was family, a heartbeat that guided us for decades. Musicians from around the world shared memories and gratitude. Drummers young and old called him a teacher, even if they had never met him in person. On social media, one fan wrote, "I never saw him live, but his music taught me how to breathe again." Simple words that carried the weight of how deeply his art touched people. In his personal life, Jack was known for his kindness and quiet humor. He lived away from the spotlight, preferring the peace of nature and family. Those close to him say he still practiced daily, exploring new sounds even in his 80s. Music was never a career for him. It was a lifelong conversation with the universe. Throughout his career, he received countless honors, Grammy Awards, Lifetime Achievement recognitions, and places in jazz halls of fame. Yet what mattered most to him was not the trophies, but the moments. Moments on stage when a song came alive. Moments when a young musician learned to trust their own rhythm. In the later years, he spoke often about peace and presence. He believed that music could heal, that rhythm could connect people when words failed. It was this belief that made his performances feel sacred. Even in silence, his presence filled the room. Friends say that even as his health declined, he remained surrounded by love. Family, old bandmates, and students gathered to play softly near him, gentle notes, familiar melodies. They said it was how he would have wanted to be remembered. When news of his death was confirmed, the jazz community paused. Clubs dimmed their lights. Radio stations across America played his recordings late into the night. For one evening, the world listened, not just to music, but to memory. Jack DeJohnette's impact cannot be measured by albums or awards. It lives in every drummer who dares to experiment, every musician who believes that rhythm can tell a story. His influence stretches from concert halls to quiet bedrooms where students still learn their first beat from his recordings. He was more than a drummer, he was a guide. Through every snare hit and cymbal crash, he taught that music was not about perfection, but about feeling. That the silence between notes could speak louder than any sound. Today, his absence is deeply felt. But his rhythm remains, steady, eternal. The kind of rhythm that doesn't fade when the music stops. Because Jack DeJohnette's beat was never meant for one moment in time. It was made to echo, across generations, across hearts, across the timeless spirit of jazz itself. As one longtime friend said, "Jack's gone quiet now, but the world will keep moving to his time." The American flag flew a little lower this week, as news broke that William Middendorf II, a respected diplomat, statesman, and former Secretary of the Navy, passed away on October 24, 2025, at the age of 101. A man who lived more than a century of history, Middendorf witnessed war, peace, and the slow, deliberate shaping of the modern world. His passing marks the end of an era, one defined by honor, intellect, and lifelong service to his country. Born in Baltimore in 1924, William Middendorf grew up during the Great Depression, a time that forged both his discipline and sense of duty. He served in the U.S. Navy during World War II, a chapter that would influence his life forever. After the war, he turned his focus toward diplomacy and public service, believing deeply that peace could only be maintained through understanding. By the 1970s, Middendorf had become a trusted voice in Washington. Appointed as the 62nd Secretary of the Navy, he led the department from 1974 to 1977 during a complex period of post-Vietnam rebuilding. Colleagues remember his calm leadership and sharp intellect even during turbulent political times. He believed in modernization, not just of ships and fleets, but of ideals. A former aide once said, "Mr. Middendorf never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His presence carried weight." That quiet strength became a hallmark of his leadership style. After his time in the Navy, Middendorf's service continued overseas. He represented the United States as ambassador to the Netherlands, and later as ambassador to the European Union. Those who worked with him admired his ability to listen, to understand before acting. He often said diplomacy was not about winning arguments, but about building bridges. Beyond politics, William Middendorf was also an artist and writer. Few knew that behind the statesman's calm expression was a man who loved to paint and compose. He created portraits, composed classical music, and wrote several books on politics and history. Even in art, he sought meaning. The same discipline that guided his public life carried into his creative work. Tributes began pouring in soon after his death was announced. Former Navy officers shared messages of gratitude, calling him a leader of principle and quiet courage. One naval statement read, "Secretary Middendorf's vision shaped the modern Navy. His values still guide us today." Others from the diplomatic world called him a man of history who always looked toward the future. In his later years, he became a mentor to young diplomats and military officers. He encouraged them to see service not as power, but as responsibility. Friends say that even in his 90s, his mind remained sharp, filled with stories, lessons, and the same sense of curiosity that had carried him through a century. Those close to him describe a man of grace and humility. He never sought fame or public spotlight. He preferred the quiet dignity of meaningful work. He once told a journalist, "The real measure of a life isn't how loud it was lived, but how many people it quietly served." Through his writings and speeches, he reflected deeply on history. He spoke often about the importance of remembering the past, not with nostalgia, but with purpose. He believed America's greatest strength came not from wealth or power, but from the courage of its people to keep learning and adapting. At 101 years old, William Middendorf had seen the world change in ways most people only read about. He had stood in rooms where the future of nations was debated. He had walked the decks of naval ships, painted portraits of friends, and written books about peace. Every chapter of his life carried the same theme: service, knowledge, and respect. When the news of his passing reached the Pentagon, flags were lowered in tribute. Navy bands across the country played soft renditions of "Eternal Father, Strong to Save," a hymn often heard at sea. It was a simple but fitting farewell to a man whose life was forever tied to the water and the service that shaped him. For his family, friends, and colleagues, the loss is profound. Yet there's comfort in knowing that his legacy lives on, in the institutions he helped build, in the sailors he inspired, and in the values he carried forward. William Middendorf's century-long journey reminds us that greatness is not always loud. Sometimes it's found in the steady hand of a man who chooses patience over pride, reflection over power, and purpose over ambition. As America says goodbye, it does so with deep respect for a man who gave his entire life to his country, in war, in peace, and in art. His voice may be silent now, But his influence remains written across history, and in every act of service, every diplomatic handshake, and every note of quiet courage, the spirit of William Middendorf II continues to live on. It was a quiet morning in early September when the news arrived. Sally Irene Saxa, remembered for her timeless beauty and gentle grace, had passed away at the age of 83. The world of classic cinema paused for a moment. One of its softest, most radiant lights had gone out. Her passing on September 8, 2025, left a quiet ache among those who cherished the golden era she once illuminated. Born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1942, Sally grew up in a time when television was new. Fashion was finding its rhythm, and Hollywood shimmered with unfiltered charm. From her earliest days, she carried an effortless elegance, an aura that seemed both confident and kind. Her friends remembered her as the girl who always smiled, even when no one was watching. Before she ever stood before a movie camera, Sally was crowned in beauty pageants, celebrated for her poise and presence. Her natural grace made her a favorite in the local press, often described as the quiet beauty with eyes full of dreams. Those pageants opened doors that would lead her toward the bright lights of Hollywood, an industry that was, in the 1960s, transforming faster than anyone could imagine. It was during this period that Sally found her way into the films of director Roger Corman and producer Gene Corman, whose youth-driven beach movies became cult favorites. In 1965, she appeared in Beach Blanket Bingo, one of the most iconic surf films of its time. With her golden hair, soft expression, and natural charm, she captured the carefree spirit of the decade. Audiences didn't just see an actress, they saw youth, vitality, and a certain innocence that only the 1960s could hold. Her roles in How to Stuff a Wild Bikini and The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini carried that same warmth. Though often cast in supporting roles, she had a glow that made her memorable, even in scenes that lasted only a few moments. Film historian Don Stradley once described her presence as the kind of beauty you notice not because it demands attention, but because it feels familiar, like someone you already miss. That quiet familiarity became her signature. Sally never chased fame, but her image lingered in the minds of viewers long after the credits rolled. Through the late 1960s, as Hollywood's style shifted and new trends emerged, Sally began to retreat from the screen. She found herself drawn to life behind the camera. Photography became her passion, her way of preserving the world's gentle details. Friends said she would spend hours chasing the perfect light, often capturing the stillness of everyday life. A child's laughter, a bird mid-flight, the way morning sun touched glass. In an interview many years later, she reflected softly, "Acting taught me how to see light. Photography taught me how to feel it." Her work as a photographer gained quiet recognition. She was never one to seek publicity, but those who knew her say that her photographs were as graceful as she was, each one a whisper of nostalgia. Her artistic eye remained sharp even as time passed, and she continued to explore new ways of expressing beauty through simplicity. Away from the public eye, Sally built a peaceful life surrounded by art, family, and nature. She was described as humble, gentle, and endlessly kind. A close friend shared, "Sally never spoke loudly, but she made everyone around her feel seen." That was her real gift. Her family remembered her as a woman who valued moments over memories, someone who found joy in quiet places. She believed beauty was everywhere, her niece said. Even in the smallest things, a shadow, a reflection, a smile. Though she stepped away from acting, the legacy of her early films endured. Fans continued to rediscover her through old reels, classic TV reruns, and film festivals celebrating the beach movie era. Social media tributes poured in after her passing, with one admirer writing, "She was the sunshine of a simpler time. Our reminder that joy can live forever on film." Sally's life wasn't defined by fame or headlines, but by the gentle impact she left on others. Her generation of actresses brought a unique kind of magic to cinema, unpolished, natural, and deeply human. She belonged to a time when beauty wasn't about perfection, but about spirit. In later years, Sally often attended small gatherings of film enthusiasts who celebrated the 1960s surf movie generation. She would smile shyly when fans recognized her, often saying, "Those were wonderful days. We didn't know we were making memories. We were just living them." Her passing marks not only the end of a personal journey, but also a quiet farewell to an era, the golden glow of youth that defined a cultural moment. She represented a bridge between innocence and art, between image and emotion. As tributes continue to emerge, many reflect on how Sally Sax's beauty wasn't just external, it was her perspective, her softness, her calm understanding of the world. She taught, without ever saying it aloud, that grace could be both powerful and gentle. A former co-star once said, "We were all chasing attention back then. But Sally, she was chasing the light, and somehow she always found it." Today, her photographs remain a part of her legacy, scattered across private collections and quiet corners of the internet. They carry her touch, the same sense of calm and clarity she brought to every frame she stood in. In remembering Sally, we remember an age of pastel skies, sandy beaches, and music that made the world feel young again. She embodied that world, a living symbol of optimism and grace. Her story is a reminder that even the briefest appearances can leave lasting impressions. That true beauty lives not in fame, but in authenticity, and that a quiet life, lived with love and art, can echo far beyond its years. As the screen fades to black, and the sound of waves carries softly in the background, we remember Sally Irene Saxe, not just as an actress or a model or a photographer, but as a soul who captured the fleeting light of youth and turned it into something eternal. Her legacy remains in the glow of film reels, in the smiles she left behind, and in the timeless grace of a woman who found peace in simplicity. She may have stepped out of the spotlight long ago, but in every frame she touched, her spirit still shines, gentle, radiant, and beautifully alive. It was a quiet Saturday morning when the news broke. Richard Davies, the voice and founding spirit behind Supertramp, had passed away on September 6, 2025. The world of music fell into silence, remembering a man whose songs once filled arenas, car radios, and countless hearts. The voice that carried both hope and melancholy was gone. Born in Swindon, England in 1944, Richard Davies grew up surrounded by rhythm. His early years were shaped by the sound of post-war Britain, a nation rebuilding, a generation finding its voice. He was drawn to the piano as a boy, often spending hours learning melodies by ear. His parents encouraged his passion, though few could have imagined the music that would one day come from those small, determined hands. In his 20s, Richard set out to find something that felt honest, something new. He played in small bands, searching for the right mix of sound and soul. That search led to the formation of Supertramp in 1969, a band that would soon redefine the sound of 1970s progressive rock. Supertramp's beginnings were modest. A few friends, a few borrowed instruments, and an ocean of ambition. But their sound, an emotional blend of rock, jazz, and storytelling, stood apart. Richard's rough-edged voice, paired with his haunting piano melodies, became the heartbeat of the group. Their early albums gained quiet attention, but it was the 1974 release of Crime of the Century that changed everything. Songs like Dreamer and School captured the restless energy of a generation. With each note, Richard revealed something deeply human, raw emotion wrapped in melody. In interviews, he often spoke humbly about his success. "We just wanted to make music that felt real," he once said. Music that people could live with, not just listen to. By the late 1970s, Supertramp had become one of the defining sounds of their era. Albums like Even in the Quietest Moments and Breakfast in America brought them international fame. The latter, released in 1979, became a masterpiece of soft rock and introspection. Songs such as The Logical Song and Goodbye Stranger showcased Davies' lyrical depth and emotional honesty. His raspy, heartfelt delivery made every word feel personal, almost like a letter to the listener. The band's success wasn't just in the charts, it was in the way their music lingered. Fans connected to the feeling behind every line. There was joy, but there was pain too. In each song, Davies offered a piece of himself, and that vulnerability became Supertramp's greatest strength. As the years went on, tension grew within the band. Creative differences and personal changes led to a slow parting of ways. By the mid-1980s, the original lineup had fractured, but Richard carried the Supertramp name forward, determined to keep its soul alive. He continued touring and recording under the Supertramp banner, producing albums like Brother Where You Bound and Some Things Never Change. His voice aged, but it never lost its power. It became deeper, weathered, like the sound of a man who had truly lived his music. Former bandmate Roger Hodgson once said in an interview, "Rick was the anchor. He was steady, focused, and always thinking about the next song. He lived for music, nothing else." In private, Richard was known to be humble and introspective. Away from the spotlight, he spent his later years in California, surrounded by family and the quiet comfort of music. Friends described him as calm and deeply thoughtful, a man who could speak volumes with just a few words. One close friend shared, even when he wasn't at the piano, music followed him. He could be sitting at breakfast, humming a tune that would stay in your head all day. Despite decades of fame, Richard never seemed consumed by it. He believed music was a shared experience, something that belonged to everyone. His songs were never just performances, they were reflections. Reflections on life, love, confusion, and the strange beauty of it all. His passing on that September morning marked the end of an era, but also the continuation of a sound that refuses to fade. Tributes poured in from all corners of the world. Fellow musicians called him a visionary, fans called him a friend. On social media, one fan wrote, "Supertramp was my soundtrack growing up. Rick's voice carried me through so many moments. Thank you for the memories." His music had that rare quality, timelessness. It didn't matter if you were hearing "Take the Long Way Home" in 1979 or 2025, the emotion was the same. It spoke to anyone who had ever felt lost or hopeful or human. In a 2010 interview, Richard reflected quietly on his journey. "I think music is like a photograph," he said. "It captures who you were at that moment. And when people listen, they find a piece of themselves in it." That philosophy guided him throughout his life. To him, songs were living things, meant to evolve, to breathe, to comfort. Even in his later years, he remained curious, often experimenting with new sounds in his home studio. His passion never dimmed. As the years passed, his influence grew even stronger. Younger artists cited him as an inspiration, not only for his music but for his honesty. His ability to combine introspection with melody created a bridge between progressive rock and the heart of storytelling. For fans, Supertramp wasn't just a band, it was a feeling. A reminder of road trips, late-night conversations, or quiet mornings when a familiar song played softly in the background. When the world learned of his passing, radio stations revisited his music. "Give a Little Bit" filled the air once more, echoing through homes and cars, reminding everyone of his lasting message, of kindness, of connection, of giving. Richard Davies left behind more than albums and accolades. He left behind soundtracks to millions of lives. His voice, sometimes rough but always sincere, continues to reach across time. As one tribute beautifully said, "He made music for dreamers, for those who saw the world not as it was, but as it could be." Today, when listeners return to those records, they don't just hear a song. They hear Richard himself, every emotion, every reflection, every quiet truth. His music remains, still full of life, still speaking softly to those who listen closely. And as the final notes of a Supertramp classic fade, we remember Richard Davies not just as a singer or songwriter, but as a storyteller of the human heart. A man whose music became a mirror for the soul. His voice may be silent now, but his melodies will never stop playing. In every chord, every lyric, and every gentle pause, Richard Davies still lives, forever the voice of Supertramp, and forever the voice of a generation that believed in the power of song.